The War Council chamber on Voltoria Prime was built to intimidate. Carved from a single massive crystal that had taken 3 centuries to grow, it soared 200 feet above the polished obsidian floor. Holographic star maps floated in the air like captured galaxies, each point of light representing a world in the Voltorian Empire. Around the vast circular table sat the military elite of the coalition, generals who'd commanded fleets for longer than human civilization had existed, admirals whose tactical brilliance had ended wars before they began. And at the head of the table sat Princess Kelara, her navy blue skin marked with the SILVER Chinese letter tattoos of the royal house, her blonde hair woven with crystalline beads that chimed softly when she moved. At 23 by human reckoning, barely an adolescent by Voltorian standards, she was the youngest princess ever to hold a military governorship. Beside her, looking profoundly out of place in his simple Earth military fatigues, sat Captain James Sullivan. 6 feet of weathered humanity, sandy hair going gray at the temples, green eyes that had seen too much combat on too many worlds. He was 38 years old, which made him ancient by human military standards and a literal infant by coalition reckoning. He was also, according to the intelligence reports scattered across the crystalline table, the only thing standing between Princess Kelara and a full-scale rebellion in the Outer Rim territories. "This is absurd," General Thaxmore rumbled, his massive form dwarfing his seat. The Kelmorian's fur was silver with age, and his service record stretched back 400 years. "Your Highness, with all due respect, the situation on Hellion IV requires a military response. The Separatists have fortified positions in the northern mountains. They have anti-air capabilities, shield generators, and an estimated force of 20,000 insurgents." "I'm aware of the situation, General," Kelara replied coolly. "I read the same reports you did." "Then you understand," Admiral Shenva cut in, her purple skin flushed darker with frustration, "that this cannot be resolved through negotiation. The Separatists have rejected every diplomatic overture. They've declared your governorship illegitimate. They're demanding independence and threatening to attack coalition supply lines. We need to deploy the 7th Fleet immediately, establish orbital superiority, and commence ground operations." "A show of overwhelming force," General Thaxmore agreed, nodding his massive head. "Standard pacification protocol, we could have the situation resolved within a lunar cycle." "By resolved, you mean kill 20,000 people." James spoke for the first time, his voice quiet but carrying clearly in the vast chamber. Every head turned toward him. Thaxmore's lips curled back from his fangs. "The human speaks, how refreshing." "Tell me, Captain Sullivan, how many interstellar conflicts have you resolved in your vast 38 years of existence?" "Enough to know that pacification protocol is a fancy term for mass slaughter," James replied evenly. "And enough to know that killing 20,000 people will create 40,000 new enemies, their families, their friends, everyone who survives and wants revenge. You presume to lecture us on military strategy." Shenva's tone could have frozen hydrogen. "Your species has barely left its own solar system. The Coalition was waging interstellar war when your ancestors were still living in caves." "That's precisely why you should listen to him," Kelara interjected. "Admiral Shenva, How many rebellions has the coalition faced in the Outer Rim territories in the past century? The admiral blinked, caught off guard by the question. 7 major insurrections, 15 minor. And how many were resolved through pacification protocol? All of them, Your Highness. And how many of those territories are currently stable and prosperous? Silence. That's what I thought, Kilara said softly. You've been winning battles for 400 years, General Thaxmer, but you haven't won the peace. Every rebellion you crush breeds another. Every planet you pacify becomes a recruiting ground for the next insurrection. So what do you propose? Thaxmer demanded. That we simply allow them to secede. The Outer Rim territories are rich in resources. If we let Hellion IV go, every other colony will demand independence. The Empire will fracture. I propose, Kilara said, rising from her seat with fluid grace, that we try something different, something humans excel at. She nodded to James, who stood and activated a holographic display. The star map dissolved, replaced by detailed topographical scans of Hellion IV's northern mountains. The Separatists aren't wrong to be angry, James began, his fingers moving through the hologram to highlight specific locations. Hellion IV has been a coalition mining colony for 80 years. In that time, 90% of the planet's mineral wealth has been extracted and shipped off-world. The local population has seen almost none of the profit. Their infrastructure is crumbling. Their hospitals lack basic medical supplies. Their schools are underfunded. They're not rebels, they're desperate people who have been exploited for 3 generations. They're insurgents who have killed coalition personnel, General Thaxmer growled. 12 guards at a mining facility, James acknowledged. After those guards fired on a protest of unarmed civilians, killing 6. I'm not saying what they did was right, General. I'm saying I understand why they did it. He zoomed in on the largest separatist stronghold. Here's what we know. Their leader is a woman named Sira Valthes. Former coalition engineer, worked in the mining operations for 30 years. She's not a soldier, she's an organizer. The separatists aren't a military force, they're ordinary people who have been pushed too far. Miners, farmers, teachers, they have weapons, yes, but they don't want a war, they want to be heard. So we should simply give them what they want. Admiral Shenva's tone was scathing. Capitulate to terrorists? We should give them what they deserve, Kilara corrected. Justice, dignity. A stake in their own future. She looked around the table, meeting each general's eyes in turn. I'm not deploying the 7th Fleet to Hellion IV. I'm not sending soldiers to kill desperate people who have legitimate grievances. Your Highness, Thaxmer began. I'm going myself, Kilara continued. With Captain Sullivan, no fleet, no army, just the 2 of us. The council chamber erupted. Generals were on their feet, shouting over each other. Admiral Shenva's purple skin had gone nearly black with outrage. General Thaxmer's roar silenced them all. Absolutely not. The Kelmorian's voice shook the crystal walls. Your Highness, you are the governor of 14 star systems. You are 3rd in line to the imperial throne. I will not, allow you to fly into a hostile combat zone with no protection except 1 human soldier. With respect, General, Kilara said quietly, you don't have the authority to stop me. Then I'll go over your head to the Emperor himself. My father already approved the mission. Thaxmer's jaw literally dropped open. Shenva looked like she might faint. The Emperor, Kilara continued, agrees with my assessment, and he shares my confidence in Captain Sullivan's abilities. She smiled slightly. After all, the captain did save my life on Arcturus Station. I think he's earned the right to watch my back. James remained expressionless, but his mind drifted back to Arcturus. The assassination attempt, the plasma fire in the corridors, Kalara wounded, her guards dead or dying, and James there on a diplomatic mission, unarmed except for a ceremonial sidearm, holding off 6 Krell assassins in a narrow access tunnel for 27 minutes until reinforcements arrived. He'd taken 2 plasma burns and a knife wound, but Kalara had lived. "One human," Shenva said, recovering her composure, "against 20,000 insurgents. Your Highness, even if the captain is as skilled as the reports suggest, and I'm not convinced he is, the mathematics alone make this impossible." "Nothing is impossible," James said quietly. "Just improbable. There's a difference between confidence and suicidal stupidity, human." James turned to face her fully. "Admiral, I've read every after-action report from the last century of Outer Rim conflicts. You know what the Coalition's biggest weakness is? You fight like you're immortal. Because most of you are, or close enough. You have centuries to learn from mistakes. You can afford to be patient, to think in terms of decades-long campaigns." He tapped the Hellion IV hologram. "Humans don't have that luxury. We burn fast and bright. 80 years if we're lucky, half that on the battlefield. So we got really, really good at solving problems quickly, at thinking on our feet, at improvising, adapting, and finding solutions that don't involve overwhelming firepower." "Pretty words," Thaxmer rumbled. "But words won't stop bullets." "No," James agreed, "but they might prevent bullets from being fired in the first place. That's the whole point." Kalara moved to stand beside him, her hand resting briefly on his shoulder. The gesture was casual, but every being in that room recognized it for what it was, a statement of absolute trust. "Here's what's going to happen," she said. "Captain Sullivan and I will take a civilian transport to Hellion IV. We'll request a meeting with Sira Valthas under flag of truce. We'll listen to the Separatists' grievances, and we'll negotiate a settlement that addresses their legitimate concerns while maintaining coalition territorial integrity." "And if they shoot you on sight?" Shenva demanded. "They won't," James said with certainty. "I've analyzed Valthas's public statements. She's not a fanatic, she's a pragmatist. She knows the Separatists can't win a military conflict with the Coalition. She's hoping to make the cost of putting down the rebellion so high that we'll agree to concessions. If we show up in person, unarmed, willing to talk, that's not what she's expecting. It changes the calculation. And if you're wrong," Thaxmer pressed, "if she decides that killing a Voltorian princess is worth the martyrdom," James's expression hardened, "then I'll do what I did on Arcturus Station. I'll put myself between her and anyone who wants to hurt her. And I'll hold that line until my last breath." The simplicity of the statement hung in the air. There was no bravado in it, no machismo, just a flat statement of fact from a soldier who'd already proven he meant exactly what he said. "I don't need soldiers," Kalara said, her voice ringing with quiet authority. "I have my human, and he's worth more than your entire 7th Fleet because he understands something you've forgotten in your 400 years of service, General Thaxmer. He understands that the best way to win a war is to prevent it from starting." 3 days later, a battered civilian transport touched down in the northern mountains of Hellion IV. The landing site was surrounded by armed insurgents, miners and farmers clutching plasma rifles with the awkward grip of people who'd never wanted to be soldiers. The transport's ramp lowered. Princess Kelara descended first, her hands empty and raised, wearing simple traveling clothes instead of royal regalia. Behind her came James, also unarmed, his military bearing obvious despite the civilian clothing. They were immediately surrounded by weapons. A woman pushed through the crowd, late middle-aged by human standards, though who knew with alien physiology, her orange skin weathered by years of hard labor, her blonde hair streaked with gray. "I'm Sira Valthas," she said, her weapon trained on Kelara's chest. "Give me one reason not to shoot you right now, princess." Kelara didn't flinch. "Because I came here to listen, because I came unarmed, because I left an entire war council arguing that I should bomb you from orbit and I told them no." She paused. "And because I brought someone who understands what you're fighting for." Sira's eyes flicked to James. "The human." "Captain James Sullivan," he said, taking a careful step forward. "I read the reports about the mining facility incident, about the protest, about the 6 civilians who died when coalition guards opened fire on unarmed people asking for better safety conditions." Something flickered in Sira's eyes. "You did." "Every word, including the parts that were classified. The parts that detailed how the facility administrator had been warned 3 times that the processing equipment was failing. How he ignored those warnings because fixing them would have cost money and reduced quarterly profits. How 6 people died because someone valued profit over safety." Sira's weapon lowered slightly. "The coalition called them rioters, said they were armed." "The coalition lied," Kelara said flatly. "I have the original reports. I've seen the security footage that was suppressed. I know what really happened, and I'm here to tell you that those guards will face justice, that the administrator is being charged with criminal negligence, and that you were right to be angry." "Right to be angry," Sira repeated slowly. "But not right to rebel. I think," James said carefully, "that you did what you thought you had to do. I think you tried every legal avenue first, filed complaints, organized peaceful protests, appealed to every level of coalition bureaucracy, and you were ignored, dismissed, and finally fired on. So yeah, you fought back, I get it." "You get it," Sira said, her tone skeptical. "A coalition officer gets it." "I'm not coalition," James corrected. "I'm human. My planet was colonized, exploited, and nearly destroyed by more powerful civilizations before we developed FTL. I know exactly what it feels like to watch your resources being stripped away, your people being treated as expendable labor, your complaints falling on deaf ears." He met her eyes. "I also know that if you kill us today, the 7th Fleet will turn this mountain range into glass, and everyone you're trying to protect will die. So this is a threat." "No," Kelara interjected. "It's a fact. General Thaxmer is waiting for an excuse to deploy overwhelming force. Don't give him one." She took a breath. "I'm here to offer you an alternative, real local governance, profit sharing from mining operations, investment in infrastructure, hospitals, schools, a seat on the territorial council, everything you've been asking for." Sira stared at her. Why would you give us this?" "Because it's right," Kelara said simply. "And because Captain Sullivan taught me that the strongest empires aren't built on fear and force. They're built on justice and partnership." "One human taught you that?" Sira's laugh was bitter. "Your people have been ruling the galaxy for millennia. What makes his opinion so special?" Kelara smiled. "Because he's only going to live for another 40 years, maybe 50 if he's lucky. He doesn't have time for the slow, patient approach. He doesn't have centuries to gradually shift policy." So he had to figure out how to solve problems fast. And you know what he figured out? That treating people with dignity and fairness is faster and more effective than any military campaign. She gestured to the mountains around them. You can shoot us right now, make us martyrs, trigger a war that will kill thousands and ultimately accomplish nothing, or you can talk to us. Give us a chance to prove that change is possible, that the coalition can do better. Sira looked between them, the alien princess with her navy skin and blonde hair, and the human soldier with his weathered face and calm green eyes. Then she looked at her people, the miners and farmers who'd taken up arms not out of malice but out of desperation. "Why just you two?" she asked finally. "Where's your army, your guards, your fleet?" "I don't need soldiers," Kelara repeated softly. "I have my human. And he's taught me that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is show up unarmed and trust people to do the right thing." James added quietly, "We're betting our lives that you're better than the coalition generals think you are. That you're not murderers, that you're people who want justice, not bloodshed. So prove them wrong, Sira. Put down the weapon and talk to us." The silence stretched. Somewhere in the mountains, wind whistled through stone. The insurgents waited, their weapons trained on the princess and the human who'd walked into their stronghold with nothing but words and faith. Then Sira Valthas lowered her rifle. "All right," she said, "let's talk." 6 months later, General Thaxmore stood in the same Crystal War Council chamber, staring at reports that made no sense. Hellion IV, stable. Insurgency dissolved. Mining profits increased by 40% through efficiency improvements suggested by former separatists. Zero coalition casualties. "I don't understand," he admitted to Admiral Shenva, who looked equally bewildered. "How did one human accomplish what 400 years of military doctrine said was impossible?" On the view screen behind them, live footage showed Princess Kelara and Captain Sullivan walking through a Hellion IV market, surrounded not by guards but by ordinary people. Children ran up to the princess, offering her flowers. Sira Valthas, now the elected local governor, walked beside them, laughing at something James had said. "He showed up," Shenva said finally, something like wonder in her voice. "He showed up unarmed, listened, and treated them like people instead of problems to be solved. It's so simple it's almost insulting." "Maybe that's why it works," Thaxmore rumbled. "We've been fighting for so long we forgot there were alternatives." On the screen, Kelara looked up at James and smiled. That particular smile she reserved only for him, the one that made the human blush despite his military composure. And James, this impossible human who'd somehow convinced an ancient empire to try something new, smiled back. "I don't need soldiers," they heard Kelara say to someone off camera. "I have my human." And the crazy thing was, Thaxmore thought, watching them together, it was actually true. Sometimes one human was enough.